It's a great pleasure for me to hand over to Alison Marsden, who I'm just going to spotlight for you all so you can see her. She is our guest speaker today. And we're delighted to have Alison with us. She is a social and therapeutic horticulture practitioner and advisor, and her practice is called Gardening by Design. Alison's a long-term advocate of the power of gardening to support well-being. As a trained social and therapeutic horticulture, or STH, practitioner, her experience includes working with dementia cafes, care homes, hospice day therapy, mental health service users, and community gardens. In July 2024, she completed an MSc in Mental Health Recovery and Social Inclusion with the University of Hertfordshire, and this underpins her own practice and support provided to other projects. She's very keen to see the expansion of STH in the UK, and she's a keen member of the Professional Development Forum too, which works towards that aim. And one of the clear challenges lying in how we, towards this goal, are in how we evaluate and improve the effectiveness of STH. This was the focus of our MSc research project. Alison's first career in IT culminated in project and risk management, transferable skills that are just as useful now that she has swapped an office for a garden. I'm delighted to hand over to you, Alison. Please do take it away and share your screen.
Thank you very much for that. No pressure then. Gosh, did I write that at the start? Thank you very much for that. Thank you to everybody for turning up and everybody who might watch this later. I'm just going to share my screen and you should see some slides appear. So I'm hoping that someone will tell me that they can see me screen sharing.
Yeah, that looks good.
Okay, thank you very much. Yes. So I did complete my MSc with research project in July 2024. I have got to start with a tiny bit about me and how I came to run this project, because I think that slightly puts it all into context. And but it really was, it's the why, what, and how to measure the benefits of social and therapeutic horticulture. I was focused on mental health projects, supporting adults with mental health difficulties. But one of the things that will come out of this actually is that many of those benefits are just universal human needs. And a lot of this will apply to any of you working in areas of STH, perhaps around physical health or adults with learning disabilities. So, let's try and click again. Click. So, social and therapeutic horticulture. This is the definition. This is the definition actually that the Development Forum use, and it is, and it's the one that I used for the project in terms of determining what projects and what academic studies to include in. So it is simply around, in a structured, programmed way, a trained practitioner engaging with people using plants, gardens, nature connection to improve physical, mental health and well-being. So it's the broad church of therapeutic horticulture. So let's start with the why. This is a bit of an elephant in the room moment, really, because I think it is very easy for those of us who are practical people to say, isn't measuring for bean counters. I'm a fully signed up bean counter in my original career. And so I'm going to try and explain why I think it's important. So it isn't just about counting beans. It isn't just about financials, although we all know that very little happens without funding in this world. Why do we bother to measure? Because we all know it works. The participants in the sessions tell us it works. We know it works. And
sorry, can I just interrupt? Alison, sorry to interrupt. Your sound's coming and going a little bit. I wonder if you could
put the microphone down a little bit.
I wonder if you could just maybe sit very close to the laptop as well.
Well, yeah, but I've got I should have the mic on my headset, so it should be.
That'd be great.
What's that? Let me see if that is it actually picking up the headset microphone. Okay, let's see what happens. If it doesn't get better, then interrupt me again here, and I will try and reset the headset.
It's still coming and going a bit, but
Oh,
it may be
hold on a sec,
better
though.
without the microphone actually. Just
Yeah, if I can just let me disconnect that. And let me speak and put it in here. Okay, so it's now. Is this any better with the? I've just reattached the headset. Is that still coming and going?
it's possibly a little bit clearer now.
Okay, the other thing. Okay, if not, I'll unplug completely. So the object of measurement and measuring particularly sort of the outcomes, it is about defining, evaluating and improving as well as demonstrating that the Social and Therapeutic Horticulture programme has a positive impact. And that having a positive impact on our participants is the goal. That's why we're there, that's why they're there, that's why everybody is there. And in essence, in some way, form or another, all those stakeholders, whether that is the practitioner, the organisation supporting them, the people who attend, the carers and supporters of the people who attend, anybody who provides funding. You know, it's really important that we know it's working and we know that it is actually working in the best possible way for everybody involved, whether they're committing money or time to the programme. So hopefully the idea of measuring for its own sake to improve our offering is important enough. However, it is also a requirement for particularly charity governance. If many STH projects are charity or not-for-profit, it is a requirement to evaluate and improve the performance of that organisation, whatever it is. And of course, we all know that underlying a lot of this, STH struggles for funding, and having some measurement is key to securing funding, whether that's personal donations or going for grant funding or commissioning from a health service or a mental health community service. The other reason I think that's really important, it is a phrase that it's used a lot in business, perhaps much more than in the third sector, is you get what you measure. So whatever we count, whether that's in a business context or a voluntary context, that is what people strive to deliver. And I think that's really important here. It tells us we have to measure the right things. We're not just measuring the things that are easy to count. You measure the right things. So if you want people to benefit, if you want to know that their mental health is benefiting, that's what you have to measure, because everybody involved will strive to deliver what you measure or what you count, because it is human nature to believe that that is the most important thing. So whatever we are measuring or counting, that must be the most important thing in our organisation, and therefore that is what we will all put our effort into. So actually it's really important to measure the right thing and not get sort of sucked into measuring stuff because it's easy to count. So what do we measure? The very simplest thing are numbers and narratives. So numbers, how many groups we run, that a project runs, how many people attend, does everybody, does people drop out, those sorts of simple numbers of people, and then collecting feedback from them. Almost every project that I surveyed as part of this research collected testimonials and stories and narratives. Those are really, really important, but it's not quite the whole picture, and that's where measurement comes in. So outcomes are really how people benefit, and that's what tell us how it works, why it works. It gives us some ability to demonstrate that it works, and it also enables the profession, not just an individual project, to learn from best practice. So if we measure how people benefit, not just that they feel better afterwards, then we can learn from that and spread those best practices around. The final thing in this, before we move on to the more interesting part, is, and this is a really, really key point, it's very obvious and it's very common sense, but I was quite surprised when I started the research how frequently it is not true. So whatever we try and measure should be within the remit and the control and the time frame of the programme. So if somebody's attending a once a week STH program for 2 months or 3 months, whatever we measure, whatever we say, what's changed, how have they benefited, that has to be something that is provided by the project over that 2 or 3 month period. So that might be obvious, but I would definitely hold on to that thought as we go through. So let's move on to why I did this. Guys, is this volume, is the microphone working better now?
It is, yeah, it's much
Okay.
better. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, Fiona said all these lovely things. I'm an STH practitioner. I've worked across a range of client groups, mainly focusing on mental health, supporting people through with their mental well-being. We've talked about IT. One of the crucial things really for me was I was trying to work in STH to support people's mental health needs. I had no prior education, training or lived experience in the area of mental health. So I really felt that was a bit of a hole in my ability. So in 2021, I engaged on this, a master's degree in mental health recovery and social inclusion. I didn't set out to do a master's. It's just the only course I could find that would fit in with me. So, and it was massively challenging, but it was also massively interesting. And I am pleased, in retrospect, I've done it. So that's where this project came out. Why did I pick outcome measurements? Partly because I was very familiar with this from my first career, but also my own experience and talking and networking with other practitioners. And I hope this resonates with those of you who are STH practitioners, is that there had been no research into how we should measure programs or evaluate them or decide that this is the best it could be, or we could do better if we changed something. There was no tool that was labelled or tested or designed for STH. There are mental health tools. In fact, there are dozens, possibly hundreds of holistic sort of overall mental health and mental well-being measurements. And that is what we end up using. But there was no consistency, no guidance, no single obvious tool that really sort of worked for STH. So it seemed to me that there was a bit of a gap somewhere, or a bit of a disconnect in what we were doing and what we had. The other side of that is we all know that social and therapeutic horticulture and other green therapies are great. We all can probably list out benefits. There have been lots of studies identifying those positive effects. Natural England put one out. Gosh, the DEFRA 25-year plan in 2018 included a lot of the benefits of STH and green therapy. But what's clear is that the people in the clinician and the commissioning side, they can say, well, we know you've told us that this is why it's good, but we want some actual evidence. You know, we like academic evidence. We want to know, we want to see something a little bit more concrete, a little bit more quantitative. Whether people are then, you know, commissioning or funding or supporting or referring to the program. So measurement was happening. Anybody who runs a program will know that measurement is happening. Lots of great reports were being produced saying these are the benefits, but there was still a sort of big question mark over why we haven't actually nailed. There just seemed to be, to me, something missing in how we measure STH, and it certainly wasn't simple. So for me, that question turned into the research project, like I say, focusing on mental health benefits, because that's the area I was working in. So the questions were, what are the benefits that we provide? That's what we need to measure. So whatever participants say, I benefited, my mental health benefited from the STH program by doing this, through that, in this way. That's what we need to capture, and that's what we need to measure, because that's what is within the remit of the control program. The second question was what tools, models, questionnaires, whatever are out there that people are using, either in practice, in programs, or in academic studies. And do those match what we need to measure? Because something somewhere is not fitting together. There's a bit of the jigsaw missing. And then obviously all I had to do with a ton of data that I collected was say, well, what is missing and where might we find this, whatever is missing in this whole setup, this missing piece of the jigsaw that makes it so difficult or so unsatisfactory. What is it and where might we find it? So we could, in fact, change the way that we measure social and therapeutic horticulture and actually measure the outcomes. So what I did pretty much what most people do, I think. I asked participants, and we'll have a look in a moment. I've got a couple of slides on how I did that. So I asked participants who attend programs. I asked practitioners who run programs what they thought the answers to these two questions were. And I did analyse whatever previous studies I could find in all the academic databases. So what was clear, there were no studies into how we should measure STH. But obviously, like I said, there is a lot of evidence. People have looked for benefits and they have sort of measured mental health results for STH programs. So there is data out there. And what I did was I took, if you like, all those sources of data and then effectively had a great pool of information that I was then looking for, where things were the same, where they were different, where there were relationships, where there were disconnects, and I tried to make some sense of actually what was really happening. I visited 3 projects. They were all adults with mental health difficulties, but quite a range, some more severe, some people who were really struggling with social isolation and trying to avoid their mental health declining further. All adults, but quite a wide age range. The 3 projects were selected on the purely practical basis of they were all within about an hour of where I live, so I could realistically visit them. So they were across West Kent and East Sussex. And obviously there were projects where the practitioners and the people who were responsible for running the programme very kindly agreed that I could visit during one of their sessions to talk to one or two of their groups of participants. So a lot is owed to these people, and there was a huge contribution from everybody involved, and this is true for the practitioners as much as the participants. Nobody said, "Oh my goodness, why are you talking to us about measurement? Why are we doing this?" Everybody understood there was some need and desire for evaluation and improvement. Everybody was very generous in their time and the thought they put into it. It wasn't just a tick box or a glib answer. People had really thought about this. And particularly with the project visits, there was a lot of insights into elements around how measurements are taken, how data is gathered. We talked also about not just questionnaires of how do you feel better, but actually more around best practices and giving constructive criticism, how people would be confident to give what we call constructive criticism. So this is great, but it's better if, or I felt uncomfortable when. I'm not really going to touch on that in this discussion because we really would be here all night, but there's quite a lot of things came out of the value that the participants and practitioners gave me that I've sort of parked for future work and happy to share with people offline. That was a discussion. Have you benefited? How have you benefited? And how, what do they think of the current tools and questionnaires that they're using? That was pretty interesting because, of course, people who are users of mental health services have more experience probably than I as a practitioner of mental health models and questionnaires and assessments and evaluations. So they shed a huge amount of light onto this, some of which will be revealed later. A second group were practitioners. If some of you are practitioners on Trellis's email list, you may well have answered the survey, in which case, if you did, thank you very much. I don't know who you are because it was completely anonymous. Trellis, Thrive and the Chartered Institute of Horticulture group all promoted this through their email lists, mostly UK respondents, but I did make it clear it wasn't solely aimed at the UK. a lot of the academic studies were overseas, and it's a big, look at who's on this call today, it's a very global arena. So 35 responses, yes, 30 I think from UK, 6 from overseas, very similar contributions. The time and the effort that people put into this, I was absolutely bowled over. And one of the insights was really backing up this lack of clear choice of tools. Lots of tools, nothing really seemed to work. People had tools and they were now changing to a different one to try and measure. A sponsor of the programme had asked them to use a particular tool or questionnaire, didn't really seem to capture what their participants were expressing. You know, so there was lots of, in that sense, it was clear that there is a need for something new. And there we discussed, yes, the aims of the programme, the benefits that they're trying to give people, what tools they use that may be off the shelf, what other information they were collecting, because there was a lot of other information collected that was not really being provided by these off-the-shelf questionnaires, and picking people's brains really for their suggestions or their to harvest information on what people felt would be the way forward. So moving quickly on, I did find 15 studies, 6 I think in the UK, and the rest across Europe, North America and Asia, so quite widely spread. All social and therapeutic horticulture supporting adults with mental health difficulties. And I was really harvesting, because a lot of people have done a lot of research, of course, I was harvesting the same bits of data, the benefits that participants expressed, and how any tools, models, questionnaires, or whatever that were being used to measure effectiveness. And this was when I had a real light bulb moment, and something that I suppose tied in with what participants had been saying when I looked at the studies. The academic studies, the roughly 50-50 split of the 15, either identified benefits in narrative form, so people's description of I felt less stressed by being outside, meaningful activity, helped me become more confident. Those sorts of narrative benefits that I think an awful lot of you guys will recognise. And those were done in narrative terms, a narrative list, if you like, or they used a mental health tool or a symptom tracker tool for a before and after over a 6-week, 2-month, 6-month, whatever period. The point here is that none of those academic studies did both of those things. They were either listing the benefits or they were measuring before and after rather sort of holistic mental health. And if you like, that was a light bulb for me as into why we were, as a practitioner and as participants, were saying what we're measuring doesn't really tie up with the benefits that we're describing. Because in fact, nobody was measuring the narrative benefits. The benefits were described, were not being evaluated. So how many people benefited in that way? Was it a little bit? Was it a lot? What was the impact? We were simply listing out the benefits. Any measurement was done before and after the whole program, and you simply can't attribute any change in mental health, improvement or deterioration over a 3-month period to the attendance once a week of an STH session. There's too much else going on in those people's lives that influences their mental health. So the before and after measurements are not, remember I said it had to be within the remit and control of the programme. You can only measure what the programme can give, and what was being measured is much, much wider. And in fact, those same studies concluded that there was generally an improvement in people's mental health through these measures, but they couldn't attribute it to the once a week STH session, precisely because it was so much else was going on that might influence it. So it sort of explains why there's quantitative information or quantitative studies, but they're not really satisfying the need that clinicians and commissioners and whatever have for some actual data rather than just this narrative list. So before I go on and actually say what benefits did I pick up, guys, do you want to have a quick look at the chat, see if there's anything that I need to address before?
I don't think so, unless anyone has a burning question they'd like to put now. There's a couple of very good questions or comments, but I don't think there's anything.
Nothing that needs to be discussed before we go on and look at the results, because what we're going to do now is what were the results of all this mushing of data.
Oh, hold on. Yeah, no, that can come at the end too. Thank you, Anna. Okay, no, I think we can carry on.
I'm very conscious that I'm just talking and everybody else is probably just
we're listening avidly.
Oh God, oh dear, that's even worse, isn't it? Okay, so analysis of the benefits. Okay, so this is these are rather convenient. There were 16 benefits that came out of talking to participants, talking to practitioners, reviewing all these studies that I found, and I had to pick 16 terms or words to match them. There was a lot of data, lots of people said the same things, and I was trying then, as people in research always do, to find a word or a term that summed it up. So belonging is where so many people talked about the sense of being part of a community, having, not feeling that they're isolated because of their mental health difficulty, and that brings more confidence and gives them a sense of more social interaction, which build, so all of those sorts of things. So that's belonging. And then choice is being able to choose what to do, what to grow, what to do, what to work on today, that sense of choice leading to empowerment. So I'm not going to work through all 16 of these, but I'm very happy to discuss them separately. And it may be eventually that if this research contributes to a new tool for STH, we can change the terms, we can get better descriptions and whatever. But so things like giving structure to people's lives, meaningful activity, all of these were the benefits that came out of all those different three groups of people I spoke to. And this is the sort of stuff that had been listed out before. But because I was trying to ask the question about, well, what are we measuring and how do we measure it? And do the tools that we've got match what we're trying to measure? I started looking through some structured analysis tools on these things and saying, well, are they all the same? Are there relationships between them? Is, for example, a person-centered approach, is it the same? Do you measure it in the same way as you might measure somebody's sense of belonging or somebody's reduction in the symptoms in their mental, in say, depression? And actually, when you think about it, these are not all the same. They're all benefits of STH, if you like, that people have identified, but they're not all the same. So I coloured them in, and I will talk through these briefly and to why I've coloured them in different colours and why I've grouped them. But one thing that you will notice out of the whole 16, the elements that we can, the tools we have measure, and that the academic studied measure, are mental well-being and symptom reduction, those big holistic mental well-being elements. And those are 2 out of 16, which tells you that what we are measuring is not really adequate. It's not really reflecting where people say they are benefiting. So that was sort of a bit of another one of those light bulb moments, that these are not all the same. In fact, and I was looking for, I've chosen some terms, and I've established suggesting some relationships here. So overall mental well-being and symptom reduction, those are a very high level thing. So that's, if you feel like, the end impact. How does that impact somebody's life in general, or their health in general? And below that are the outcomes that we want to measure, those things that people said they gained that were specific to social and therapeutic horticulture. So those are the things like an increased sense of belonging, an increased sense of contributing, more social interaction, meaningful activity, boosting confidence and self-esteem. Those are the things that are the outcomes that I believe we need to measure in order to say, within the remit of the programme, people said their sense of belonging increased from very low to very high, or whatever. The third category are not, they don't make, it is not a way in which the individual participant changes, if you like. These are, if you like, best practices. So the STH programme provides choice. It is person-centred. It provides a safe space. So these are characteristics of the programme, and I'm sure there are more. This is just the stuff that I came across, and this is where, as a profession globally, UK, we can start building on best practices. Lots of people saying that sense of inclusivity. Not everybody's can do what they can do. Nobody's judged. That's very important. And actually, that's an attribute of the programme, and it enables and supports the outcomes. And those outcomes together produce impacts way out beyond the Social and Therapeutic Horticulture programme. So impacts are people's whole lives, which is why measuring them doesn't really work within the programme. So what we have, instead of benefits, STH provides loads of good things, right, in 3 buckets. So this is a very simple diagram. I have a much more complicated diagram if anybody's, I love diagrams. If anybody's a bit of a geek like me and wants a big diagram, I've got a great one. I'm happy to share. But for most of us, best practices are the characteristics. They support the delivery of the outcomes of hands-on benefits that participants say they gain. And actually, those outcomes contribute to overall mental health, quality of life, and those are measured in the. So the impacts are the things that are measured by the tools that are out there. The stuff down here, we don't seem to have any tools to measure outcomes or best practices. And that's why there's a bit of a gap, and it doesn't really, that's where, from my point of view, what we have doesn't really seem to satisfy what we need to measure. Quick thing on tools, yes. I find this slightly surprising, but absolutely staggering. A 2023 academic review, published peer review, not done by me, 49 horticulture programs across the world, therapeutic horticulture, used 126 different measurement tools. And not surprisingly concluded that there's a lack of common outcome measurement. Makes it very difficult to measure and compare and improve. So that's almost two or three each. Each program on average was using 2 or 3 different measurement methods to assess the benefits. Practitioner survey in the that I ran, very similar findings on a smaller scale. 13 of 35 people used off-the-shelf mental health tools, 12 different tools across 13 different programs. So there is no consensus. Everybody struggled to find tools that matched what they were trying to measure. 23 had collected different data. They've got their own list of data or elements or metrics they wanted to collect, and pretty much everybody collected testimonials, which are not part of outcome measurement, but they are very, very important. One of the problems with all of this is an awful lot of effort goes into people trying to find tools, measuring things that don't really tell them what they want to know, just really in order to, in some stages, simply satisfy sponsors or funders. And it doesn't really help us across STH identify why it works, learn as a profession, develop best practices and all of that stuff. Okay, the last, I've got 5 minutes. What I'm going to move on to now is actually the thing that it may in fact be the most useful in all of this. So I sort of established where the problems are, and we need to measure these outcomes. it was sort of clear, I suppose, that STH cannot be the only intervention or the only support that delivers these sorts of outcomes to people to support their mental well-being. There must be other things that people do, or that mental health services, ways in which mental health services support people. And way back at the beginning of this, my deck, I said I'd done my MSc was mental health, recovery and social inclusion. So mental health personal recovery is, it's been around, early 90s. It was originally defined, but it's really, really since 2000, 2010, it's really evolved. The National Health Service in England and Wales promotes mental health personal recovery support. And what this is, it's just a thing, it doesn't seem to be very well known throughout social and therapeutic horticulture. So it is not about recovery in the sense of I recovered from a cold, a broken leg. It is about giving individuals a fulfilling life, regardless of the fact that they may be living with mental health and mental health diagnosis for their whole life. That won't go away, but they can live a meaningful, fulfilling life, full of, to the best of their ability, and them as a person, and not just a diagnosis. So it's easy to define, but it's actually it's easy to describe. It's very difficult to define, and there are lots of different ways and models of doing this. One of them is a personal recovery model called TIME. TIME is an acronym. You can see down here the 5 words that make it up. It was published by Mary Leamy and her team in 2011. And I picked it for the study because it is the most widely referenced English language description and model for mental health personal recovery. And this says, it's a bit like universal human needs, if you like. It's saying that in order to live a fulfilling, meaningful, supported life, even with mental health difficulties, people need to feel connected, they need to have hope and optimism, they need to feel that they can move forward. It won't always be like this. They need a sense of identity, not just a diagnosis. They need meaning and meaningful activity and progress, and they need to feel empowered that they can make choices, that they can have a big impact on their own health and life and well-being. And in a sense, it's going to move forward. I found one study, a 2023 review, I think it was UK based, that identified actually horticultural therapy addresses all the principles of mental health personal recovery, as long as you've got somebody to facilitate that, and it is, and a recovery oriented approach, i.e. you've got somebody who understands personal recovery and can use STH to contribute to these things. And without spending any time on this, really, if you look at the list of the outcomes that we have here, and all the things that as practitioners people say they benefit from, there is a real alignment. The words are different, but interaction, belonging, contributing is all if you look at the details of being part of a community, feeling connected. So meaningful activity, choice, taking responsibility. This is around identity and empowerment. So I didn't do a lot more work on this, except to say we definitely should begin to talk about personal mental health recovery in the world of social and therapeutic horticulture, because there is so much that we can gain from that, and potentially use it as a way to measure some of the benefits. Because if we recognise STH as a recovery-oriented intervention, it doesn't change what an STH program does or offers, but if we recognise it as delivering those recovery principles, there's lots of knowledge, there's tons more research. If you add the word recovery into a search, you get a lot of information. There's best practices, there's models. Like I said, the NHS operates a recovery-oriented model of community mental health services. So in a sense, it certainly warrants further investigation as a way to get aligned with something that's already very well established. Of course, a bit like STH, there's no single handbook for recovery. It's a personal journey. Everybody starts from a different place. Everybody's goals are different, and there's no single outcome measurement tool. I can't just say use this and we can measure STH. So it's not a simple answer, but it's definitely an area where I think we can benefit from doing more research as an STH profession. And that's the end, basically. If we focus on outcomes, then we're measuring what's within the control of the programme, and those outcomes appear to be very strongly aligned with mental health recovery. And that is an area that I would certainly be very interested in with people who have more experience in that area. That's the diagram if anybody wants it. And otherwise, I'm done.
Thank you, Alison. That was incredible. I know several people did want your diagram, so don't listen to me next time you're planning a talk. I thought it'd be overkill
to talk through online. I have it I have a document that's got the diagram and really quick synopsis of what it means, and I'm quite happy to share that with Trellis, and if or people can contact me directly for it.
Great. I would just like to make sure your study and the references on our research page so that people can find it and read it. Do you have a published version, or is it
not
something...
No, because it was an MSc, not a dissertation. I don't have a published version. I have a version that has the names of the project redacted, and I have a version that with all the references as well that can be.
Great.
But it's not a peer reviewed published paper.
Okay.
Yet.
Well, that would be great just to share it. Let's see people that learn from the value of your
right.
research. I wanted to draw attention to the fact we have a very special person with us today, Rebecca Haller, the co-author of the two textbooks in the field. I wonder if, Rebecca, if you're at your desk and you could unmute and just say hello.
Fiona, do you want to unspotlight me?
Oh, sorry. Yes, I'll just unspotlight you.
Everybody.
And so we can see everyone. Yes. Hi, Rebecca.
Yes, and thank you, Alison, for that. Very, very interesting research. Yeah.
Great.
Hi, Fiona. Thank you.
Lovely to have you with us.
Yes.
Did you just want to say something about? I mean, we would love to have you join us on another day to talk about your the new edition of the book and what's new and so on. But I just wanted to let everyone know you're here, because I think it's really nice to see that you're with us, and for everyone to know that you can be contacted and you're still here.
Absolutely. And actually that third edition of the methods, horticultural therapy methods book just came out, and I'm really excited because I think it has a lot of pretty important updated stuff in it. But anyway, and I just got off at teaching 3 different courses of the same topics that had a lot to do with what you guys are talking about today. So I'm always interested to see how people go about measuring outcomes. And so often in the US, we find we need to create our own tool for a specific situation. So it's always interesting to see what everybody's up to with that. So I appreciate being able to be at this.
Great. Lovely to have you here. Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
So we are going to just take some questions from the chat, because there are a lot of questions. I know people are going to put you on the spot now, Alison, a bit, or just say how wonderful it is that you've given some attention to this. Is that going to be you, Jenny, or Joe? Who's going to voice the questions? Or is it just for me to do?
I can voice away if you want to know.
Thanks. Just put your volume up a little bit, Joe, if you would.
Okay. Is that better?
Slightly, yeah. You're quite quiet still.
Temperamental little laptop. Good. I hopefully asked the question, but somebody asked about answers come in differently, but they asked about assessments.
Sorry, carry on.
Okay. Assessments for people with neurological conditions. I can't actually see the question. I'm just seeing Anna's response.
Yeah, I was, in order to get some, firstly it was a mental health qualification, but in order to get some sort of, you know, boundary around it, I didn't look at or try to find any assessment methods for, if you're talking about neurological, we're talking then, what about neurodiversity, perhaps, or, you know, autism, or are we talking about?
It's actually
anyway.
Neurological rehab.
Oh, right.
He's working in a neurological rehab unit
Okay.
with patients often recovering from significant brain injuries and a variety of cognitive impairments. And she's running a therapeutic gardening group with them. Did you come across any systematic reviews or solid research in using STH in this population, traumatic brain injury, neurological conditions, etc.?
I didn't. The academic studies I was searching for were around mental health rather than, you know, so I had to, so they would be, the studies would, you know, they wouldn't have mental health in the title if you're talking about that sort of thing. I did 6 weeks of running a once a week project for the UK charity Headway, which is brain injury, people recovering from significant brain injuries. We were using one of the standard tools because it was a study that I was just teaching on around mental health, but that was almost like mental health benefits. So it was all of, this is what I said, is the, you know, it's like the universal human needs around belonging, connectivity, meaningful activity, confidence. And so actually they benefited in all those ways, not necessarily, but we weren't assessing for, did it make any difference to, you know, their cognitive function and it was more about, well, it's more, if you like, the personal recovery aspect of that, that I was seeing benefits to. So the answer is no, but I suspect that a lot of the personal recovery attributes would be really relevant unless you're looking at a bit like, you know, regaining small motor movement, you know, much more physical things. So the answer is that, the answer really is, I didn't delve into that. But, you know, somebody should, because it's really important.
Thank you. Sorry, I couldn't see the question and I found it now. So I was struggling there. There's another one from Dominique who says, thank you very much for the work that's being done towards this kind of measuring tool. She'd like to know your thoughts on this. If NHS ICBs are commissioning STH programs, for example, as part of green social prescribing, how would previously unknown NHS STH providers demonstrate their effectiveness? And would you think sector-wide data is sufficient as and when it's available?
I think this is very difficult, isn't it? Because we can say that we know that STH works, you know, there have been studies, but does that mean that your program or the program you are proposing or somebody else is proposing is one that, you know, warrants being commissioned or funded? That's very difficult. I think if we do all start measuring roughly the same thing, then we can build a body of evidence across the industry, which will help, you know, get rid of that how do we know it works question, but also give individual projects the ability to say, well, you know, we're measuring what everybody else is measuring, and, you know, this is what we've done to improve, and in that sense. So it's very difficult when everybody's desperately trying to measure stuff, but there is no support, no consistency, no tools. So at the moment, I just think it's hugely difficult. And if anybody is interested in joining me and trying to do a bit more research and, you know, make this into something, I'm very happy to hear from you. But I think, yeah, green. One of the pressures on this is with things like NHS and green prescribing. You know, I think one of the sort of drivers for having better evaluation is the fact, actually, you know, somewhat ironically, that STH is now more widely acknowledged to be a worthwhile thing. And because it's being acknowledged to be a worthwhile activity, people are looking for actually then some data to make decisions on. So it's sort of a good thing, although it's, you know, it's a difficult situation.
I think possibly, Joe, I should have just let people unmute, shouldn't I, and ask their own questions. Sorry. I just wonder if Anna's question is particularly pertinent here because of the work beginning to develop at Stanford Hall. It's maybe not specifically neurological rehab, but it will involve, I think, neurological components. Would you like to say something there?
What you mean, me? Where to start, really? I think one of my biggest learnings is when I started with a pilot project to test the benefits of horticultural therapy as a rehab intervention for injured serving personnel at Headley Court. I found a wonderful, wonderful horticulturalist called Carol Sales, and she was working, teaching horticulture in a prison at the time. So she wasn't a qualified occupational therapist. She was, and I say was because sadly she's no longer with us, she was an absolutely fabulous horticulturalist. So that's what she brought to the table. But one of the big learnings that I took with me at the end of the pilot was when we went to Stanford Hall. Carol didn't come with us because she had an aging mother in Surrey and it was a long way. But it gave me the opportunity to recruit someone else to be the horticultural therapist. And the big lesson that I learned then was I knew I had to look for a registered OT, because in order, all the patients who are referred to horticultural therapy must be referred by their occupational therapist with reasons for referral, which makes the measurement easier because we know what they've been referred for, if you like. So the fact that Carol didn't speak OT, she was able to say they'd had a great time, but when the OT said that they wanted reporting about, you know, what had happened to their patients during the sessions, it just didn't come out because she didn't speak their language. So that was a really, really, really key lesson for me. I hope that helps.
Thank you. Really interesting to hear that. Sorry, I'm just going to hand back to you, Joe, to pick up the questions that I'm not seeing coming in.
Yeah, I don't know if there's any other questions. Lots of comments to say thank you so much, and really useful and very helpful. And a few people mentioning the Warwick Edinburgh mental wellbeing score as a kind of a basis, but a lot of people kind of having to adapt it a little bit. And actually, Angela has made, it might be interesting to hear what she says on that, but that they find there's not much difference in the score from, you know, baseline and then 12 months later, but participants have had huge benefits, but it's not showing in that scoring. So it's obviously not quite doing the job for what they're trying to measure. But a lot of people use that as a basis, as several have come and said that's their kind of scoring measure that they use as a starting point.
Yeah, can I jump in on that one? Because I have also used Warwick Edinburgh, and of all of them, it is certainly, actually, if you look at the individual questions, I think Warwick Edinburgh it's very interesting to look at. It could be a bit of a sort of like a sheep in wolf's clothing rather than the other way around. If you look at the individual questions, they are very useful, and they are in fact the sorts of, they reflect quite well the sort of benefits that people say they experience, and it's quite recovery focused, although it wasn't, I don't think, created on the back of mental health recovery. However, when you add them all together and just produce a score before and after, you fall into the same problem of this one holistic sort of number and everything else that's going on in that person's life over the 3 months or the 6 months or whatever it is. So it's certainly an area where, because it looks both at people's functioning, people's ability to function, and people's feeling of well-being, it's definitely, I think it's got scope in there to be part of the mix, if you like, and it is the one that I have seen used most. But it's this before and after, when it's outside the control of the program, that I think we struggle with, the application of those questions. But yeah, it's certain. I agree with all the people who used it. I've used it as well.
Thanks, Alison. And there aren't any other questions, Fiona, per se.
Thanks. Someone's asking for the link for WimWebs, the Short Work Edinburgh Mental Wellbeing Score, and hey presto, Joe has popped in the chat for you. Claire, do you want to just say your comment out loud, or would you just like to leave it there, or should I?
I can do, if you can hear me.
Yeah, we can.
So we've been running a social prescribing project, so our sort of outcome methods have been strongly led from what the social prescribing agenda is. I'm in Wales, so we started doing some work with the University of South Wales, who did a realist evaluation, which brought up a lot of the same sort of outcomes that Alison was talking to about being connected and belonging, and having meaningful interactions and being able to learn things, all those kind of elements. And then we formed a sort of outcome toolkit, which lets us gather evidence in different categories that match the things that our participants have said they value about our project. So we're reviewing that now, but we do find that our funders, the NHS partners that we have that are very key to us, they do like the language of the SWEMwebs. They like the language that they are familiar with. I'm an occupational therapist myself, and it has really been helpful to be able to talk to them in the language that they want to understand, but also to be able to talk to our volunteers and our participants in the language that they understand, in terms of what things they're going to get out of it. But yeah, it's a really fascinating and complicated kettle of fish to try and unpack.
Thanks, Claire. It always has been.
I would be really, if you have got a sort of, lots of people who answered the survey that I did said they had tools. Of course, I didn't know who they were. It was anonymous. So if you have tools, if you are prepared to share that either through Trellis or connect with me on LinkedIn.
Yeah, it's more of a sort of, it's quite bespoke to our project and the toolkit that we use. So I'm not sure that it's something that another project could pick up and run with.
Okay. Perhaps we could. I'm very happy to. Perhaps we could. If I would say, if you've got time, it would be interesting to discuss. I'm sure it will add light to what I've already been looking into.
Yeah,
you're prepared to share.
I'll just drop my email in the box, and then you can hopefully pick it up later.
Okay. If anybody else wants to follow up with me on LinkedIn, I'm sure we're out of time here. I am, in fact, Alison Marsden on LinkedIn. Like, I'm not the only one, and I probably wasn't the first one, but I am. In fact, if you look on LinkedIn. I am LinkedIn/Alison Marsden. I don't know how I managed that.
And we can pass
makes it easy.
Contacts to Alison as well if you add them in the survey or in the chat here. I think we're going to have to wrap up because we're after 4 o'clock already here in the UK. And so if you do have any questions that haven't been addressed yet, there will be an opportunity in the survey, which we'll share the link to, just to let us know what you thought, how that was for you at the end. So just pop your email address in there. It's weird on Zoom, but there's a little reactions button at the bottom if you would like to show your appreciation for Alison. I'm just over the moon with your presentation. It was really great, and like everyone's saying, thought-provoking. So thank you so much, Alison. We all really enjoyed that.